In this module, we cover the key capabilities of using validation with data binding. First off, we started with the easy stuff, which is if you want to use an exception to indicate that a value that's being set on a set block is an invalid value, then you simply throw that exception and set the validates on exceptions property on your binding. Control will kick in, it'll show whatever error template it has, and it will indicate that there's a validation error for that input. You saw that another mechanism that's specific to WPF is to use validation rules. You inherit from a validation rule base class, you override a validate method, you implement whatever logic is appropriate for your validation rule in that class, and then you attach that validation rule to a binding. You have to use an expanded syntax for the binding, using nested elements instead of curly braces, and those validation rules don't have a lot of context passed in, just simply a value, so you often need to put additional properties on there and set them from the XAML, so that the validation rule can have some decent logic in it. But these are a decent way to define an encapsulated rule that can be reusable across different scenarios in your applications. Next, we looked at IDataErrorInfo, which is the most common way of doing validation on business objects and has been around since .NET 1.0. IDataErrorInfo is an interface you implement on your model objects that will be queried by the binding when you enable it after it sets the property. And that querying basically lets the binding ask the object, are you happy with the value I just set on a given property? And your implementation is expected to return an error string if not. The control will then kick in and indicate that there's a validation error. Next, we covered iNotifyDataErrorInfo, which is an asynchronous version of IDataErrorInfo. Came in .NET 4.5, and it supports scenarios where you may need to go make an asynchronous call to something like a service to determine whether an input value is valid. You can then raise an event that will cause the binding to requery for errors and show the error indications at the point where the error arrives. Next, we talked about some binding and validation events that are available, and you saw that these are simple events that you can hook up on your controls, and the validation error event in particular ties in with validation to let you have handling in your code behind whenever the validation state of a control changes. Next, we looked at how you can provide custom control templates to change the way built-in controls render when there is a validation error. Instead of the default red box around the control, you can put a red dot to the right, you can put an overlay on it, you could put dancing bears and spinning stars on the control if you like. We also covered how you can provide a tooltip to present the error information. Finally, we finished off with data annotations and explained that they are a standard way in .NET using attributes to indicate validation rules associated with a property. There's a set of built-in data annotation attributes for common scenarios such as required, string length, and regular expressions, and you can write your own custom rules and attach them through data annotations as well. You saw that in WPF you need a little bit of code to get the data annotations evaluated, but that's easy to introduce from the set blocks of your properties.